Hi, I'm Chance.
And I'm Sarah Catherine.
And this is Conservation Connection,
presented by Last Chance Endeavors.
We run a wildlife education nonprofit focused on connecting students to their environment.
Each week here on Conservation Connection, we do just that by introducing you to the groundbreaking science and conservation work that's happening every day around the country.
We talk to professionals in the world of conservation science and wildlife management and ask them about their career,
their current projects,
their wild and crazy stories from the field,
and everything in between.
Join us each week to discover just how these dedicated people are working to protect our planet. Alrighty guys, welcome to another short bonus episode of Conservation Connection. We are so excited to bring back onto the podcast for his third appearance, Dr. Bob Podolsky.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for visiting us again and for your interest in what we do here.
Well, it's very interesting what you do here, so we're glad to be here. We're back this summer. You invited us to come back and cover this group of your research experience for Undergraduates Program. So you actually have 13 students, is that right?
We do have 13, more than we've ever had in the program.
It is a really excellent year for the program. So if you could, just for the people who don't know what the RU program is, can you give us a snapshot of what is the research experience for undergraduates here at Grice Marine Lab?
Yeah, the RU program, it's one of many across the country. So there are hundreds of RU programs across the country. They're sponsored by the National Science Foundation. There are maybe somewhere between 150 and 200 programs that are focused on biology or ocean science. So we're one of those. We've been running as a National Science Foundation-sponsored RU program since the year 2000. So it's a long-running program.
Very much so.
And it's evolved over the years, but the basic focus has been for many years sort of twofold. One is to give students experience with research, intensive experience. And the other is to give them experience with communicating about their research. So we run a series of workshops in science communication, and we provide opportunities for them to talk about their science, including, very fortunately for us, this podcast, which, you contacted me a couple of years ago and said, we're looking for opportunities. And it just worked out beautifully for these students to have this opportunity to talk on a podcast and talk about their science. They're always nervous about it, and you always put them at ease, and they always have a great time afterward.
And we end up with some great episodes. I mean, some of my favorite, I don't know, I'm sort of a nut for science education, and so getting to see students who are really just right on the threshold of going from high schoolers that really enjoyed science or like undergrads who, are just kind of setting foot into it to, at this point in the summer when we come out, they are neck deep in the pluff mud of their projects. They are like in the weeds of it, and they've learned that they love what they're doing. And I just really love getting to see that.
The timing is something that I thought about really carefully about when to have you here. I mean, this is the point in the summer when they're ready to produce products that are meaningful because they are saturated in what they're doing and they're willing to talk about it. They're wanting to talk about it like scientists always like to talk about what they do. They're at that point, they're still a little inhibited. You can probably tell that they feel, when they come in the room, they probably feel like they don't know enough to be talking on a podcast. And then by the end of it, they've expressed themselves. They've, validated what they're doing, and they've had a good time doing it.
Yeah, and they realize I do know what I'm doing and what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's really great. And we were so bummed that last year, of course, right as COVID was starting up, we were kind of talking about us coming out again last year to record with those REU students, and then it just couldn't happen, of course, because of COVID. And you've changed the program up a little bit this year since, obviously, when you started planning, you again weren't sure. No one was really sure what this summer was going to look like again with the pandemic and COVID. So can you tell us a little bit how this year is different from previous years?
Yes. Last year, of course, we had to cancel the program. We figured out pretty quickly that we had no way of housing students safely. And we also couldn't even pay for their travel to come here because there was a travel ban. And so that no college-sponsored travel could take place. So it was one of our, really good years, more than 300 applications for the program, starting on the process of picking out students, and we decided we had to shut it down. So this year we were facing a very similar situation. We didn't know what the future held. Back in November, I had to make a decision about what kind of program it would be because I had to put out the call for applications. So by December, I had decided that the only thing we could really support was a local program. Taking on local students where we didn't have to pay for their travel to come here and having them live in their own housing because we couldn't house them in our normal housing unit at Grice Marine Lab. So with that decision, I presented on the webpage, the application webpage, that they could only apply locally. And we got some applications from non-CFC students, non-College of Charleston students. But the reason the program changed so much this year, in addition to these, logistical issues, was that we asked them to, if possible, work out a project beforehand with a potential mentor. And so many of them wrote applications that were already well thought out, and they were ready to hit the ground running with their research. It applied to many of the applications, but not all of them. At some point, the decision was also made to only involve College of Charleston faculty. Usually we have a mix of faculty from different institutions that we have out here at Fort Johnson. There are 2 federal government institutions. There are 2 other state institutions that occupy Fort Johnson. We usually have mentors from all of them participating. And that's a real benefit of the program. Usually they get to see science in these different cultural contexts, different institutions. But we didn't have access at the time to the Hollings Marine Lab where the other institutions are largely located. So I decided that we'd have to only involve CFC faculty. And that also gave me an opportunity to promote it more downtown. So we actually have about half the students working downtown with our faculty and half the students working out here at Grice Marine Lab with our faculty. So the nature of the program is quite different in the sense that we only have CFC students and we only have CFC faculty. And because of that, everybody was kind of geared up and ready to go when we started the program. And socially, they've been able to form bonds much more quickly. And, it's all colleagues that I'm working with from the department.
It's kind of the definition of hit the ground running, especially when you've got such a short period of time. Is it 8 weeks? How long is the program?
It's a 10-week program.
So that's a short time to get a lot of science done, especially, traditionally you have students coming from all over the country, from other institutions all over the place and spending their summer here in Charleston. And so to have this advantage of not only do the students already have really well thought out projects before they get here, but they know their mentors, they know the area, there is some really cool stuff happening with this group of students.
That's exactly right. I usually relish the opportunity to bring students in from all over the country and have them meet each other and live together and get saturated in their science. So there's a trade-off here. We didn't have that, but what we had is this opportunity for people to gel very quickly socially, know their mentors. In many cases, not all of them. In some cases, I had to assign some mentors or get some mentors in at the end. One other opportunity we had, because we're usually limited to 10 students because of the size of our housing, because they were going to live in their own housing this year, we weren't limited in the number of students. We were limited in the amount of money we had to support students.
But you're also not paying for their travel.
Not paying for their travel, and also NSF was willing, by my request, to give us some more funding. So we actually got funding for 3 additional students to support them.
And this is the largest group you've ever had in the RU here?
And this is the largest group. And you and I have talked about the fact that even though it's just 3 more students, you can tell when you walk into a room that the energy is very different just from that small change in size.
It honestly feels like a group of 20. Just like the energy from this group during our first class of science communication that we did with them before recording, I was like, wow, this feels like a lot of people. I know it's not that many more, but it feels like a lot.
And they were also willing, I think, to get to the level of informality that's really helpful in a program like this. I think when they come from all over the country and they don't know me and they don't know where they are, they're getting used to their mentors.
They still have some walls up.
They have walls up, and I try right away to. So one very small example is I use my first name when I write to them. And I've always tried to do that. I tried to do that with you guys too.
You had a 50% success rate.
Yeah.
But with them, I use my first name from the start because I really want them to have that level of collegiality, to develop that kind of comfort with talking with their professors who they're working with as colleagues, less as, hierarchical structured advisors. So,
and they got there fast.
They were able, well, you can see it in the social interactions. They were able to get to that level of informality pretty quickly and joke. I mean, humor is a large part of the interactions, and that's really important.
Yeah, and I think it's really valuable. I mean, every student that we've seen in an RU program gets a ton out of this experience, but I really sincerely believe that this group of students has had an experience that can't really be replicated without the conditions that they were able to do it in. I really think that the changes that you had to make in order to just have the program at all this year really resulted in a very special batch of students.
I totally agree with that. And I also have enough experience doing the program to have worked out a schedule where I'm achieving what I want in terms of their development of communication. I mean, we went through a bunch of exercises at the beginning about language and about, what you have to know about communicating with the press and what you have to know about social media, that they're really prepared for these products that we're doing at the end. One is podcast interview. Next week, we're doing an event with a group called Cultivate, which blends science and art and brings science to the public, and they bring in an artist to combine art with the science. And we're doing that for a group of 5 to 13-year-old camp kids. So they have to bring their level of language down so that kids can understand the
really
science.
Really distill it down.
Yes. They've prepared elevator pitches, but at a 5 to 13-year-old level. So there's different levels of language that they're using. They're writing a blog, which is also meant for the public, but uses slightly different level of language.
And we're actually going to go ahead and link the website that has their blog posts on it in the show notes. So if you guys are interested in reading about some of the projects more than just the interviews that we have for you, go ahead and click on that link in the show notes and you'll be able to check it out.
And the blog posts this year are terrific. I mean, again, they're achieving what I had hoped, which is to build their science communication skills to the point where they are not only clearly communicating, but writing engagingly. I mean, using metaphors and all the tools that you use to communicate with the public, they've really taken that to heart.
So one thing I do want to ask about is, since these students are local, since they all go to school here, they may not be from here necessarily, but they all go to school here, do you think any of them will either have the opportunity to or take advantage of the opportunity to continue this research after this REU experience?
I think that's, one of the main benefits of this year, not only to them, but to the faculty, is that they can count on this continuing mentoring experience and the continuing experience of doing research and producing products. I think that, in fact, from what I've overheard, many of them are thinking of this not as a program that finishes, but as something that's gotten them started and that they will continue, which, from the program's perspective, it's okay. It's not what we shoot for because we want a final product. We want a manuscript, we want a talk because we know they're going to go away. And then once the plane touches down wherever they're going, they're going to feel like it's a million miles away, because I've had that experience before. You leave a program and then you're not there, and then you're kind of done with it. And some students really detach, others don't. But it's hard to continue that mentoring experience over time. But here I think it will definitely continue. I think many of them will take my invertebrates course in the spring, which I'm really excited about.
I love that. I think we had a few people mention it.
I'm worried about the other students who are not REU students taking the class, but I think it'll work out fine.
They'll just be pulled into the fold of, that scientific brother and sisterhood, I think.
I hope so.
Absolutely. And I think it's also really valuable that you have, one of the students that we've interviewed is a rising sophomore. She just finished her freshman year. And so she still has several years here at this institution to be involved. And she's got such a great head start over students that didn't have the opportunity to do this kind of research. I'm really, really impressed with the gift that this program and you have been able to give these students, this leg up on their careers into the scientific pipeline.
One of the goals of NSF in this RU program, which they tell us every time, is they really want students to become involved earlier in research. And it's a very tough thing for us to juggle because, in a good year, we get 350 applications, and most of them are rising seniors who have not had the opportunity. So there's this big, demand that's built up over years, and yet they want us to give this opportunity to earlier students. And I totally understand the impulse to get students involved early because it tends to keep them in the pipeline. So there's this real tension in trying to serve that goal at the same time as trying to provide for the demand that's been built up among students. So we try to spread it out over different years. I always try to have, some rising sophomores, some rising juniors, but it tends to be mostly rising seniors.
But I think that this group, and maybe it's just the individuals that are here at this time, is really an excellent mix of people and of young scientists that are both tenaciously working on their own projects, but also very involved in the projects of their peers and willing to, when they go out in the field, they're not just going out in the field for themselves. They're going out in the field with other members of the REU group and helping each other in their science. And I think that's a very valuable thing for them to learn, that science is a community and it relies upon the support from other individuals as well as yourself.
I'm glad you brought that up because in a typical year, I actually build in shadowing experience as part of a schedule and do that around the 6th or 7th week of the program. And I formally have people sign up to shadow, and I make sure that everybody gets shadowed, and I make sure that everybody is shadowed by at least one person. And it seems like this very odd way of doing it because it should come naturally. And there's some of that goes on in a typical year. But this year, I don't have to arrange it for them.
I was going to say, I bet you didn't have to do that at all.
I recognize that. I mean, I told them there's going to be some shadowing set up around week 6. And by week 2 or 3, I recognized they were all helping each other. They were going out into the field to collect animals. They were going to each other's labs to see what they were doing. There's no need for it.
That's really cool.
They're all getting that experience.
I absolutely love that. They really do seem like such a connected group. We've loved interviewing them. Obviously, we'll release your episode first so people can get a sense of the REU, but we have already completed all of those interviews, and let me just tell you, they will be great, so definitely tune in. I would like to wrap up just by asking you, if someone was listening that wanted to get involved in this type of program, what would you recommend for them to do?
So RU programs, as I mentioned, there are many of them across the country. There's a website at National Science Foundation. It's easy to find. Just type in REU NSF, and it will bring up a list of the programs. These programs are looking for students who need the experience. So if you have the experience, if you have the opportunities for the experience at your home institution, you should definitely take advantage of them. I mean, go do research. It's never too early to contact somebody whose work interests you and start, just say, do you have anything I can do in your lab? Can I help another student? Can I come to your lab meetings? Can we do a tutorial reading papers? Show that you're interested early on, and you will establish yourself in a laboratory. I mean, that's how those relationships get developed. If you don't have many opportunities to do research, that's what these RU programs are really designed for. So the reason we don't typically take a lot of our own students is that clearly we have the opportunities at the college for students who are at the College of Charleston, which has made this year really special because we were able to provide these to our students who go to the College of Charleston. So my advice is to start early. Start small. You don't have to get involved in independent research in your first year. In fact, maybe you shouldn't because you have other priorities. It's good to have classwork under your belt to actually do independent research. But getting connected to a laboratory, getting connected to somebody's research in some way can start early. And that positions you to be a good candidate when applying for these programs. And just search widely, become familiar with the opportunities that are out there. Every program is doing something special because you don't get funded to run a program if it's just research. So our particular focus is science communication. That's what I built the program on, and that's what the previous people who ran the program built it on. So get familiar with the specialties of the many programs that are out there, and then just be ready to apply and hope there's no pandemic that year and they can run their programs.
I think I just hope that every year now. Like every New Year's, I'm like, please, no more pandemics.
Yeah, we didn't know that was the thing we had to hope for, but...
But now I do, and now I will. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast again and for having us back out here at this incredible institution. We're so grateful for the opportunity to work with you and with your students.
Well, I'm very grateful for you coming back and showing so much interest in our program. And hopefully we can find other kinds of opportunities in the future to communicate about science, because that's what it's all about.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely be looking for those opportunities. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conservation Connection.
If you enjoyed our podcast, go ahead and subscribe to make sure you catch every episode that we post.
We'd love to hear from you. So if you want to reach out, go to our website, lastchanceendeavors.com/contact and shoot us an email.
We love questions from our listeners, so if you heard something that you want to know more about, be sure to let us know.
If you've got a minute to spare, leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts will help other conservation-minded people find the show. We'd really appreciate it.
A big thanks to the people working to protect our planet, and a big thanks to you for listening. Don't forget to tune in next week.